"She's not our problem anymore," my sister told the surgeon's office, while I was on an operating table with my chest cracked open. That same afternoon, she posted a brunch selfie with my parents. Mimosas, white tablecloth. Caption, "Living our best life." 47 people liked it. My mother commented a heart emoji. My father didn't even know I was in the hospital. Or maybe he did. I still don't know which version is worse. 5 years later, they showed up at my front door. All three of them. And for the first time in my life, I was the one who got to decide. But what I said to them wasn't what anyone expected. Not even me. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if you genuinely connect with this story. And drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love reading those. My name is Dulcie. I'm 33 years old. Now, let me take you back to a Tuesday evening in October 5 years ago, the night my heart stopped in more ways than one. I lived alone in a studio apartment in Hartford, Connecticut, third floor, no elevator. The kind of place where you can hear your neighbor's alarm clock through the wall and the hot water gives out by 7 a.m. I was 28. I worked as a staff accountant at a small firm downtown. The pay was fine, enough to cover rent, groceries, the minimum on my student loans, and my monthly cardiac medication. Not enough for savings. Never enough for savings. Every Sunday evening, I called my mother. It was my ritual. I'd sit on the edge of my bed, dial her number, and wait. She'd pick up. We'd talk for maybe 4 minutes. Then I'd hear it. Meredith's voice in the background, laughing about something, and my mother would say, "I'll call you back, honey." She never did. Not once. I still sent birthday cards, still texted my father on Father's Day, still asked about Thanksgiving plans, even though the answer was always some version of "we'll let you know," followed by silence. I hadn't even updated my emergency contact form at the doctor's office. It still listed my parents' home number, the same one from when I was 19. I kept meaning to change it, but changing it would mean admitting there was no one else to put down. And I wasn't ready to admit that. But then I'd open Instagram, and there they were. My parents at the country club with Meredith and her husband, my parents at a seafood restaurant, clinking glasses. A family vacation to Cape Cod, 3 beach chairs, not 4. I was never in the photos. I was never invited. One night, I scrolled back 3 years, 3 Thanksgivings, 3 Christmases, 3 birthdays. I wasn't in a single image. I remembered something my father said at the dinner table when I was 16. He put his fork down, looked at me and said, "We've spent $140,000 on your heart so far. Your sister hasn't cost us a dime in medical bills. Think about that." I thought about it every day. Meredith was 3 years older than me, and she had always been the sun in our family's solar system. Beautiful, confident, the kind of person who could walk into a room and rearrange the gravity. My parents paid her full tuition at a private university in Boston. They bought her a condo when she graduated. They co-signed her first car, a white Audi, which she posted about 12 times. I took out federal loans. I went to a state school. I drove a used Civic with a cracked windshield for 2 years before I could afford to fix it. But the money wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the pattern. Every time I shared something I was proud of, a raise, a finished project, a small win, Meredith would call our parents that same week with something bigger. A promotion, a new boyfriend, a trip to Barcelona. And my news would vanish, like a candle next to a floodlight. I texted my mother once after I found out I'd passed my CPA exam. She replied 6 hours later, "That's nice, honey. Did you hear Meredith got engaged?" 2 exclamation marks for Meredith, 1 line for me. There was one person in the family who never forgot me, though. Uncle Richard, my father's younger brother. Every year on my birthday, he called. Same time, 7 p.m. He'd say, "Happy birthday, kid. You doing okay?" We'd talk for 10 minutes. It was more than anyone else gave me. But I hadn't heard from him in years. My father said Richard was dead to this family. I never asked why. I was too afraid of the answer. The last time Richard called, he said something strange. "Don't let them rewrite your story, kid." I didn't understand it then. It happened at a grocery store on a Tuesday evening in October. I was reaching for a carton of eggs on the second shelf when the pain hit. A white-hot pressure behind my sternum, like someone had shoved a fist through my rib cage. My vision narrowed. The fluorescent lights above me blurred into one long streak. I heard the eggs hit the floor before I realized I'd dropped them. Then my knees went. A stranger called 911. I remember the tile against my cheek. I remember someone pressing a jacket under my head. I remember thinking, very clearly, call my parents. The ambulance brought me to Hartford Hospital. The ER doctor said words I only half understood. Acute aortic dissection, emergency open heart surgery, possible complication of my congenital bicuspid valve. They needed to operate immediately. Under emergency protocol, they didn't need anyone's signature to save my life. But if something went wrong on the table, if they needed to make decisions about life support, about next steps, they'd need someone, a family member, a healthcare proxy, anyone. A nurse leaned over me. Her scrubs were pale blue. Her voice was calm but urgent. Is there anyone we should call? I gave them my parents' home number. It was the only emergency contact I had. They called. Meredith picked up. She was at my parents' house for dinner. I learned this later. All of it later. What she said was, "She's not our problem anymore. Please remove this number from her file." Then she hung up. I didn't know any of this when they wheeled me into the operating room. I didn't know it during the 6 hours of surgery. I didn't know it when the anesthesia wore off, and I opened my eyes to a room full of machines and silence. No flowers on the windowsill, no jacket draped over the chair, no one holding my hand, just a nurse sitting beside me. She had kind eyes and a name tag that read Nora. She looked about my age. There was a small framed photo tucked into her lanyard, an older man with silver hair standing in front of a half-built house. I didn't think anything of it then. "We called your family," she said softly. "They said they couldn't come." I closed my eyes. I didn't cry. I just lay there and thought, they couldn't come, or they wouldn't. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. The first 3 days, I couldn't sit up without help. The incision ran from just below my collarbone to the bottom of my sternum, 18 staples holding me together like a broken suitcase. I called my mother from the hospital bed. Voicemail. I called my father. Voicemail. I texted Meredith. Just 3 words. "I'm in the hospital." She saw it. The little blue check marks confirmed it. No reply. On day 5, a woman from the billing department visited my room. She was kind about it, but the numbers weren't. The total charges before insurance, over $180,000. My employer-sponsored plan covered a portion, but the copay and deductible alone came to roughly $35,000. I didn't have $35,000. I didn't have $5,000. On day 9, my supervisor emailed. The subject line was restructuring update. The body was polite and empty. Due to my extended leave, my position would be reevaluated. No guarantees when I returned. I was lying in a hospital bed with a split chest, hemorrhaging money I didn't have, about to lose my job, and not a single person from my family had called, texted, or visited. That night, I couldn't sleep. I picked up my phone and opened Instagram. Meredith's latest post was 3 days old, posted the weekend after my surgery. A family dinner at an Italian restaurant, my father cutting into a steak, my mother laughing mid-sip, Meredith in the center, glowing. Caption: Sunday dinner with my favorite people. I scrolled to the comments. A college friend of Meredith's had written, "Where's your sister?" Meredith's reply, "Oh, she's doing her own thing. You know how she is. Her own thing." I was learning to breathe without a machine. They discharged me on a Thursday, 3 weeks after I'd collapsed in the grocery store. I took a cab home because there was no one to drive me. The driver helped me with my bag. He was gentler with me than my own father had been in years. My studio was on the 3rd floor. No elevator. I made it up the stairs in 4 stops, gripping the railing with both hands, my chest burning with every breath. By the time I reached my door, I was drenched in sweat and shaking. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it. A coffee mug in the sink, a jacket on the back of the chair, a life no one had checked on. Over the next week, the mail arrived like a series of verdicts, a payment plan from the hospital, a severance letter from my company. Minimal. Clinical. A notice from my landlord. Lease renewal. Rent increasing by $200 a month. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the stack. Then I picked up my phone and called my father one more time. He answered. Dulcie. Dad, I had heart surgery. I almost died. A pause. Meredith mentioned something. Are you calling to ask for money? I'm calling because I almost died and nobody came. 5 seconds of silence. I counted. We all have our own problems, Dulcie. You're an adult. Click. I sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the refrigerator. I pressed my palms flat on the cold tile. And for the first time since the surgery, I cried. Not because of the pain, not because of the bills, because I finally stopped pretending. They didn't come because they were busy. They didn't come because they chose not to. Then the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole. A man stood in the hallway, mid-50s, silver at the temples, brown corduroy jacket. I didn't recognize him at first. Then I saw his eyes. They looked just like my father's, but warmer. It was a Tuesday, 6 days after I came home from the hospital. I opened the door. The man smiled. Not wide, not bright. Just enough. Dulcie, he said. It's been a long time. His voice unlocked something in my memory. Birthday calls. 7 p.m. Happy birthday, kid. Uncle Richard? He nodded. Can I come in? We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where the hospital bills and severance letters still sat in a pile. He didn't look at them. He looked at me, at the way I held my mug with both hands because the left one still trembled from the medication, at the way I sat hunched forward because sitting straight pulled on the staples. A nurse I know called me, he said. She told me what happened. She told me no one came. Nora. The photo on her lanyard. The man with silver hair in front of a half-built house. That was Richard. It had to be. Richard didn't rail against my father. He didn't curse Meredith's name. He just sat across from me in that small kitchen and said quietly, I know what it's like. Your dad did the same thing to me. 15 years ago. I asked him. I had to. Why did he cut you off? I went bankrupt, Richard said. Lost everything. My business, my house, my wife. Your father told the whole family I was a deadbeat, an embarrassment. Your mother went along with it. I haven't been inside their house since. I stared at the table. The pattern was the same. Fail. Become expensive. Get erased. Richard placed his hand flat on the table. I didn't come to talk about the past, Dulcie. I came because I have something for you. My pulse quickened. What? He shook his head. Not today. You need to rest first. I'll come back Thursday. Thursday? Thursday, he said. And he left. I stood at the window and watched him walk to his truck. An old Ford, clean but worn. He didn't look back. But he'd come. He was the only one who came. 3 days later, I got a text from a college friend named Jess. Hey, are you okay? I saw Meredith's post. I opened Facebook. I hadn't checked Meredith's page since the hospital. What I found made my hands go still. It was a long post, set to public, 3 paragraphs, written in the careful, trembling voice of a concerned older sister. It breaks my heart to share this, but my little sister has been struggling with some personal issues and has chosen to distance herself from our family. We've tried everything. Called, texted, invited her to holidays. She refuses. Please keep her in your prayers. Mental health is no joke. 212 likes, 81 comments. I read them one by one. You're such a good sister. Some people just push away the ones who love them. Praying for your family, Meredith. You can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. Every comment was a nail. Every heart reaction was a lock. Meredith had rewritten the entire story. In her version, she was the grieving sister, and I was the troubled runaway who rejected a loving family. I wanted to type the truth in the comment section. I wanted to post the hospital bill, the unanswered texts, the screenshot of her brunch selfie. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I stopped. Because if I fought back publicly, I'd look exactly the way she'd described me. Dramatic, unstable, desperate for attention. She'd set the trap perfectly. So I did the only thing I could. I took screenshots. Every comment, every reply. The post itself, the date, the timestamp. I didn't know why. Call it instinct. Call it survival. Then I saw my mother's comment at the bottom. 6 words that cut worse than the surgery. We love you no matter what, Meredith. You've always been the strong one. The strong one, which made me the weak one, publicly, permanently. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in bed with my laptop and started going through everything. Emails, texts, calendar entries, 3 years of communication with my family, laid out in a timeline. And the pattern was so clear, I couldn't believe I'd missed it. 3 Thanksgivings ago, I emailed my mother asking about dinner plans. She replied, "Meredith said you had plans already." I never said that. 2 Christmases ago, I called my father to wish him Merry Christmas. He said, "Meredith told us you didn't want gifts this year." I had already mailed a package to their house. No one ever mentioned receiving it. 1 year ago, I sent my parents an email invitation to a small ceremony at the accounting firm. I'd earned my CPA certification. Nobody came. When I asked my mother, she said, "We never got an invitation, honey." I checked my sent folder. The email was there. Delivery confirmed. 3 holidays, 3 lies. All filtered through Meredith. I didn't have proof yet. Not the technical kind. But the math was simple. Every time I reached out, Meredith had already told my parents a different story. I was busy. I didn't want to come. I wasn't feeling well. A wall of small lies built brick by brick until my parents believed I was the one pulling away. She hadn't just ignored me during surgery. She'd been erasing me for years. The surgery was simply the first time the consequences were visible. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark. And I remembered something. The last birthday call from Uncle Richard years ago. His voice, steady and warm. "Don't let them rewrite your story, kid." He'd known. Even then, he'd known. I just hadn't been ready to hear it. I called Meredith the next morning. She picked up on the 4th ring. "Dulcie, what a surprise. I saw your Facebook post." "Which one?" "The one where you told everyone I pushed the family away." A beat of silence, then lightly, "Well, didn't you?" "I was in surgery, Meredith. You told the hospital I wasn't your problem." Her voice shifted, lower, controlled. "I don't remember saying that. The hospital has a record of the call. 3 seconds of nothing. I could hear her breathing. "You're being dramatic," she said. "As usual. Take the post down." "Or what?" A soft laugh, the kind that's meant to make you feel small. "You'll cry about it online? Nobody's going to believe you over me, Dulcie. They never have." Click. I put the phone on the table. My hands were shaking. Not from the medication this time. From something hotter, something I hadn't let myself feel in years. Anger. Clean, clear anger. I picked up my phone again, opened the Notes app, typed the date, the time, every word she'd said as close to exact as my memory could manage. Then I went back to the screenshots from her Facebook post. I organized them in a folder, added the emails, the unanswered texts, the calendar entries. I wasn't building a case. I didn't have a plan. I was just doing what every person does when they've been gaslit for a decade. I was making sure I couldn't be made to doubt myself again. 2 days passed. Then Thursday came. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 a.m. Uncle Richard, right on time, and this time he was carrying a thick manila envelope under his arm. Richard sat across from me again. Same chair, same calm. But this time, the manila envelope lay between us on the table like a third person in the room. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he talked. "After your dad cut me off," he said, "I lost everything. Business, house, marriage. I was living in a motel off Route 8 for 4 months." He said it the way you'd describe the weather. No pity, no performance. "Then I found a house, little place up in Litchfield, falling apart, roof leaking, porch rotting, pipes frozen half the year. I bought it for almost nothing. Fixed it myself. Took 8 months. Sold it for 3 times what I paid." He leaned back. "Then I did it again. and again. 10 years later, I owned several properties. No partners, no investors. Just me, a truck, and a whole lot of stubbornness. I watched his hands as he spoke. Rough hands, working hands, the opposite of my father's. "I never had kids," he said, "and I watched your dad raise you two, from a distance, but I watched. I saw what he did to you, Dulcie. Same thing he did to me. If you cost him something, you were the problem." He slid the envelope across the table and opened the flap. The first thing he pulled out was small, silver, worn smooth at the edges. A key. "This is the key to a house," he said. "A real house, in Litchfield. 3 bedrooms, a porch, half an acre of yard. It's yours." I stared at it. "What do you mean it's mine?" "I bought it 6 years ago, fixed it up myself. I put your name on the deed the day you turned 25. I just never told you." I picked up the key. It was warm from his hand. "There's more," he said. "But let's start with this." Richard reached into the envelope again and pulled out 2 sheets of paper, folded in thirds, handwritten, blue ink. His penmanship was surprisingly neat for a man with calloused hands. "Read it when I leave," he said, "but I'll tell you the short version." He told me he'd been watching, not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet way people watch when they can't intervene. He followed my social media. He saw Meredith's posts. He saw who was in the photos and who wasn't. And through a connection, Nora, who turned out to be the daughter of an old high school friend, he'd kept a loose thread tied to my life. He knew my father had removed me from the family's estate plan. He'd heard it through cousins who still spoke to both sides. He knew Meredith had pushed for it, so he made a decision. Every property he owned, every account he'd built, all of it would go to me. Not eventually. Now. Through something called an irrevocable trust. His lawyer had structured it years ago. He slid a third set of documents across the table. Dense pages, legal language. Helen Marsh was listed as the independent trustee, the person with legal authority to manage the properties until the trust's terms transferred full control to me. Richard had structured it so that once I turned 30, management of the assets would pass entirely into my hands. Until then, Helen oversaw everything, but with standing instructions to follow my wishes. But the key lines were clear even to me. Sole beneficiary, Dulcie Emerson. 3 properties including the Litchfield house, a savings account, estimated total value, just over $1.2 million. "I'm not dying tomorrow," he said. "At least, I hope not. But I wanted you to know now, because right now, you need to know that someone chose you." I cried, not the way I cried on the kitchen floor. This was different. This was the kind of crying that happens when the thing you needed most arrives so late you'd stopped expecting it. Richard stood up. He put a hand on my shoulder. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "You don't owe them anything. You just owe yourself a life worth living." He told me one more thing before he left. 2 years ago, my father had called him, out of nowhere, wanting to reconnect. Richard saw through it immediately. Gerald had heard about the properties, wanted in. Richard said no. Gerald cut him off again. The same pattern. Always the same pattern. But this time, Richard had already built the wall around me. I moved into the Litchfield house on a Saturday in December. The first morning, I stood on the porch with a mug of coffee and looked out at the yard. Half an acre. A sugar maple near the fence, bare for winter but still dignified. A gravel driveway. Silence. The kind that doesn't feel empty. The kind that feels chosen. I started physical therapy twice a week in Torrington. On the off days, I walked the neighborhood. Short distances at first, then longer. My body cooperated slowly, grudgingly, like it was testing whether I deserved its trust again. I found a therapist, Dr. Klein, a quiet woman in her 60s who specialized in family estrangement. In our first session, she used phrases I'd never heard before: emotional parentification, scapegoat dynamics, covert favoritism. She said them like diagnoses, and for the first time, the pattern of my life had a shape I could name. I got a new job, freelance accounting at first, then a staff position at a small firm in Litchfield. The commute was 8 minutes. The office had a window. My boss didn't count what I cost. I stopped calling my family. I didn't block anyone. I just stopped reaching out. And nobody reached back. No calls on my birthday. No text on Thanksgiving, no Christmas card, nothing. The silence confirmed everything Dr. Klein had named. I kept every screenshot, every email, every record. Not for revenge. Dr. Klein was clear about that. Document it for yourself, she said, so you never doubt your own memory again. 4 years passed. I built a life that was small and steady and mine. Then, one morning in March, Nora called. Her voice sounded different, tight, careful. Dulcie, your uncle is in the hospital. She paused. And your father just showed up here asking about his estate. I drove to the hospital in under 40 minutes. My hand stayed steady on the wheel. My chest did not. Richard had suffered a minor stroke. He was stable, conscious, lucid, tired. The doctors expected a full recovery with rest and medication. But he looked fragile under the fluorescent lights, and that scared me more than anything. I found his room on the 3rd floor. But before I reached the door, I saw a figure standing in the hallway, speaking to a nurse at the station. Charcoal suit, silver watch, posture like a man who owned the building. My father. He turned. Our eyes met for the first time in almost 5 years. He didn't say, "How are you?" He didn't say, "You look well." He didn't say, "I'm sorry about the surgery, about the phone call, about any of it." What he said was, "What are you doing here?" He's my uncle. He's my brother. He hasn't been your brother in 15 years, Dad. Gerald's jaw tightened, a micro-flinch, just around the eyes. Then the mask slid back. He softened his voice, not out of warmth but strategy. I'd watched him do this my whole life. Look, I know we've had our differences, but family is family. I just want to make sure Richard is taken care of. I looked at him. Same suit, same posture, same man who hung up after 47 seconds when his daughter told him she'd almost died. That's thoughtful of you, I said. He blinked, uncertain whether I meant it. I didn't. Later, Nora told me what he'd asked at the nurse's station before I arrived. He'd wanted to know about Richard's next of kin, his power of attorney, who had decision-making authority. He wasn't here for Richard. He was here for what Richard had. The next day, I came back to the hospital at noon, and the hallway outside Richard's room looked like a stage. Gerald was there, Patricia was there, and Meredith, standing by the window with her arms crossed, scanning the corridor like she was appraising it. She looked different, thinner. More makeup than I remembered, layered thick around her eyes. Her clothes were still stylish, but the brands were gone. The handbag was faux leather. The shoes had a scuff on the left toe she hadn't bothered to fix. She saw me first. "Oh my God, Dulcie!" She rushed toward me, arms open, voice pitched high enough for every nurse on the floor to hear. "We've been so worried about you." She hugged me. I stood still. I didn't pull away. I didn't lean in. I just waited until she let go. Patricia stepped forward. "Dulcie, honey, we've missed you so much." Her voice wavered, but not from emotion. It was the sound of someone who needs something and hasn't figured out how to ask yet. Inside Richard's room, Gerald wasted no time. Richard was asleep. Gerald stood at the foot of the bed and spoke in a low voice, as though the sleeping man were a boardroom. "We need to talk about Richard's situation. He's not well. Someone needs to manage his affairs, his properties, his accounts." He turned to me. "You've been visiting him. Has he mentioned anything about his finances?" I held his gaze. "Why do you ask?" "He's my brother. I have a right to know." I let the silence stretch. "Then, you should ask his lawyer." Gerald's expression tightened. In the corner, Meredith reached for a document on Richard's bedside table, casually, like she was straightening a napkin. She snapped a quick photo with her phone, but it was only the hospital dinner menu. I saw her do it. She didn't see me see her. It happened in the hallway, 10 feet from the nurse's station. Gerald had followed me out of Richard's room. Meredith was 2 steps behind him. Patricia lingered in the doorway, watching but saying nothing. As always. Gerald's voice was louder than it needed to be, deliberate, pitched for an audience. "I don't know what you've been telling Richard, but taking advantage of a sick old man is not something I'll allow." 2 nurses looked up. A man in scrubs paused mid-stride. A woman visiting the room across the hall glanced through her open door. Meredith added, right on cue, "She's always been like this. Manipulative, playing the victim to get what she wants. I felt it land. The way public accusations always land. Like concrete poured over your feet. You can't move. You can't respond fast enough. And by the time you open your mouth, the jury of strangers has already started forming an opinion. I looked at my mother. Patricia's eyes were fixed on the floor. Her hands were clasped in front of her. She said nothing. Of course she didn't. I turned back to Gerald. My voice came out quieter than his, steadier. I haven't asked Uncle Richard for anything. He came to me, and you know exactly why. Gerald took a half step forward. We'll see about that. I'm calling a lawyer. You should. I turned and walked toward the elevator. I pressed the button. The doors opened. I stepped in. The doors closed. And then, only then, I let my hands shake. In the car, I pulled out my phone and called Helen Marsh, Richard's attorney. Helen, they're going to challenge the trust. What do we do? We don't do anything, Helen said. Her voice was calm as still water. The trust is irrevocable. They can't touch it. Then she added, but if they cause a scene, I have something that might help. Richard asked me to hold on to it. I met Helen at her office the following afternoon. It was a small firm on Main Street in Torrington. Warm wood, tall shelves, the smell of old paper and fresh coffee. Helen Marsh was in her early 50s, silver-streaked hair pinned back, wire-rimmed glasses. She spoke the way good lawyers do, precisely, without wasted syllables. Your father has called this office twice this week, she said. Both times asking about Richard's estate plan. I declined to discuss it. Attorney-client privilege. She folded her hands on the desk. But there are things Richard authorized me to share with you. She told me what Richard already knew. My father had been financially destroyed 8 months earlier. He'd sunk his entire retirement, everything, into a commercial real estate development on the shoreline. The project collapsed, permits denied, partners pulled out. Gerald doubled down, borrowing against the family home through a second mortgage and a home equity line of credit. The investment collapsed. He defaulted on the loans 8 months ago. The house was underwater. He owed far more than it was worth. The bank had filed a foreclosure lawsuit. In Connecticut, that process takes over a year, sometimes 2. But the outcome was already certain. It wasn't a question of whether they'd lose the house. It was a question of when. Meredith was in no better shape. Her divorce had been finalized a year prior. Her ex-husband took most of the liquid assets. The condo she'd been living in, the one my parents bought, the one they'd put in their own name, was tied to the house. It was part of the bank's collateral. Your father contacted Richard 2 years ago, Helen continued. Wanted to reconnect. Richard knew immediately what he was after. He refused. Your father stopped calling. Helen opened a drawer and placed a small envelope on the desk. Sealed. Handwritten label. To be opened when Gerald comes asking. Richard left this with me 2 years ago, she said. He told me you'd know when the time was right. I picked it up. It was light. I turned it over in my hands. I didn't open it. Not yet. Something told me this letter was meant for a room full of people, not a lawyer's office on a Tuesday. Richard was discharged from the hospital on a Friday. I drove him home to his main property, a restored colonial on 12 acres outside Litchfield. He walked slowly but steadily up the porch steps, one hand on the railing, the other waving off my elbow. I'm not dead yet, he said. 2 weeks later, he called me. I want to host a gathering, he said. A small one, at the house, to thank the people who showed up. He listed the guests, me, Helen, Nora, his neighbor Jim and Jim's wife, a cousin named Aunt Carol from my mother's side who'd always been kind, 2 old friends from his contracting days, maybe 15 people total. Then he said, I'm inviting Gerald, and Patricia, and Meredith. I went quiet. Why? Because I want them to see what they missed, he said. And I want them to hear it from me, not secondhand, not through lawyers, from me, in my house, in front of people who matter. I told him I was nervous. He said he understood. Bring your folder, he said. The one you've been keeping. I hadn't told him about the screenshots, the emails, the phone records. But he knew. Of course he knew. The day of the gathering was a Sunday in October. Exactly 5 years since my surgery. I don't think Richard planned that, but I don't think it was an accident either. The house looked beautiful. Warm light in the windows, leaves turning gold and copper on the maples that lined the drive. A long table set on the covered porch, then moved inside when the wind picked up. Gerald arrived in a suit. Force of habit, I assumed. But it hung looser on his frame than it should have. He'd lost weight. Patricia walked a step behind him, gripping her purse with both hands. Meredith came last. Sunglasses on, even indoors. She kept them on for 20 minutes. And I noticed Gerald doing something before he even said hello. He walked through the rooms, slowly, touching the door frames, studying the built-in shelves, running his eyes along the crown molding. He wasn't admiring the craftsmanship. He was appraising the value. After the food, roast chicken, cornbread, a salad Nora insisted on making, everyone settled into the living room. The fireplace was lit. Jim and his wife took the love seat. Aunt Carol sat near the window. Nora stood by the mantel with a glass of water. Helen sat in a straight-backed chair near the bookshelf, her leather portfolio resting on her lap. Gerald was the one who started it. He waited until the small talk died down, then leaned forward in his armchair, fingers laced, voice casual. "Richard, I've been thinking. You're not getting younger. None of us are." A practiced laugh. "Have you given any thought to estate planning? I mean real planning. Family should look after family." Richard sat in his wingback chair near the fire. He looked smaller than he used to. The stroke had taken some of his weight. But his eyes were the same. Steady, clear, missing nothing. "I have, actually," he said. "That's part of why I invited everyone today." Gerald's face opened. The tension around his jaw released. I watched the calculation happen in real time. He thought he'd won. He thought Richard was about to hand him something. Meredith leaned in. "Uncle Richard, you know we'd take such good care of everything." She placed her hand over her heart. "We're family." The word family in her mouth sounded like a currency. Richard let the silence hold for 3 full seconds. Then he looked at me. I met his eyes. He raised an eyebrow, barely perceptible. I gave a small nod. He turned to Helen. "Helen, would you mind?" Helen stood. She opened her portfolio. She removed a single document, and in the voice of a woman who had read 1,000 contracts and never once flinched, she said, "Mr. Richard Emerson established an irrevocable trust 4 years ago. The trust holds 3 properties and a savings account. The sole beneficiary is Dulcie Emerson." No one moved. Gerald blinked twice. Then, "What?" The fire crackled. Somewhere in the kitchen, a timer beeped for nothing. Gerald stood up so fast his chair scraped the hardwood. "This is ridiculous. You can't just—" He pointed at me, then at Richard. "She's been manipulating you. She's been visiting you, whispering in your ear." "Sit down, Gerald." Richard didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The words landed with the weight of a man who had spent 15 years learning how to say exactly what he meant. Gerald sat. Richard leaned forward. "I set up this trust before Dulcie even knew I was back in her life, before she visited me, before the stroke. I did it because I watched you throw away your own daughter." Meredith's voice sliced in from the corner. "Uncle Richard, Dulcie has always had a way of making people feel sorry for—" "Meredith." Richard turned to her. His tone didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. "I know what you told the hospital. She's not our problem anymore. Those were your exact words." The color left Meredith's face. Not slowly. All at once, like someone had pulled a plug. She looked at Gerald, then at Patricia, looking for backup, looking for the rescue that had always come. Patricia stared at the floor. Gerald's jaw was locked shut. Aunt Carol, sitting by the window, set her tea down. "What hospital?" she asked. "What happened?" And that was the crack in the dam. Nora, standing by the mantel, spoke for the first time. She introduced herself. "A nurse at Hartford Hospital." She described the night of my surgery, the call to my family, the response, the record of it. Jim's wife covered her mouth. Aunt Carol's hand went to her chest. Jim shook his head slowly, eyes on Gerald. No one was looking at me with pity. They were looking at my family with something worse. Understanding. I didn't plan to stand up. But I did. I was 33 years old. I'd spent 5 years building a life from the wreckage they left behind. The room turned toward me. 15 faces. Some I'd known my whole life. Some I'd only just met. All of them waiting. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I spoke the way Dr. Klein had taught me, with facts, not volume. 5 years ago, I had emergency heart surgery. The hospital called our parents. Meredith answered. She told them I wasn't their problem. Then she posted a brunch photo. I took out my phone, unlocked it, opened the folder I'd kept for years. This is the screenshot of her Facebook post telling 300 people that I abandoned the family. I held it up. This is her comment. "Oh, she's doing her own thing, you know how she is." Posted 3 days after I woke up from open heart surgery. I scrolled. This is the hospital record. It says, patient's family contacted, declined to respond, emergency contact unavailable, surgery proceeded under implied consent doctrine, patient had no designated healthcare proxy present during post-operative recovery. I looked at my father. "Dad, I called you after. I told you I almost died. You asked if I was calling for money. Then you hung up. 47 seconds. I have the phone record." Gerald opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. "That's not... I didn't... Would you like the date and duration?" He went silent. Patricia was crying. Small, quiet sobs, her hand pressed to her mouth. Gerald told her to stop. She didn't stop. Meredith stared at the rug like it held instructions. Aunt Carol's voice broke the stillness. "Gerald, is this true?" He didn't answer. I turned back to the room. I didn't come here for revenge. I came because Uncle Richard asked me to, and because for the first time I'm going to say what I should have said years ago. I felt my heartbeat. Steady, strong, earned. I'm not your burden. I was never your burden. And from this moment on, I'm not your fallback either. The room stayed quiet for a long time, long enough for the fire to pop twice. Then Gerald changed tactics. I'd seen him do this before. The pivot from authority to appeal, smooth as a dial turning. He uncrossed his arms. He softened his shoulders. He looked at me with the closest thing to tenderness he could manufacture on short notice. "Dulcie, listen. We've had a rough year. A very rough year. The bank is taking the house. We have nowhere to go." He paused. "Let that land. You have 3 properties now. Surely you can let your own parents stay in one of them, just until we get back on our feet." Meredith recovered faster than I expected. She sat up straight, smoothed her hair, and said, "Yeah, Dulcie. This is a chance to show you're the bigger person." I looked at her. 5 seconds. I counted them the way I'd counted my father's silence on the phone. "The bigger person," I repeated. "You mean the person you told the hospital wasn't your problem?" Meredith's composure cracked, just at the edges. I was stressed. I didn't mean..." "You posted a brunch selfie that afternoon, Meredith. Living our best life." "You weren't stressed. You were celebrating." Gerald cut in. "Enough about the past. We need help now." I turned to him, slowly, the way you turn to face a thing you've been running from your entire life. "You needed me to be your daughter when I was in surgery. You chose not to be there. I needed you to be my father when I called. You chose not to be. Now you need something from me." I let the words settle. And for the first time, I get to choose. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small envelope Helen had given me, the one with Richard's handwriting on the front, to be opened when Gerald comes asking. "Uncle Richard gave me this 2 years ago," I said. "He told me to open it when you came asking for help." Richard, sitting in his wingback chair, gave a single nod. I broke the seal. 2 sheets of paper, folded once, blue ink, same neat handwriting. I read it out loud. I kept my voice even. No performance, no flourish. Just words on a page in a room full of witnesses. "Dear Dulcie, if you're reading this, it means Gerald has run out of money and come looking for mine. I want you to know, you don't owe him anything. He made his choice when he let you wake up alone in that hospital room." I took a breath. "But I also want you to know this. Cruelty is a choice, and so is mercy. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it. You've earned the right to choose for yourself. That's all I ever wanted for you." Uncle Richard. I lowered the letter. Aunt Carol wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Jim's wife was holding his arm. Nora stood by the fireplace, perfectly still, her face unreadable but her eyes bright. Gerald stared at his own hands, spread flat on his knees. He said nothing. For perhaps the first time in my memory, Gerald Emerson had no argument, no angle, no counter. Then Patricia spoke, quiet, broken. "Dulcie, I'm sorry. I should have come to the hospital. I knew. Meredith told me it wasn't serious. But I should have checked. I should have come." The room seemed to inhale. She knew. She'd always known. She hadn't been lied to. She'd been given a convenient excuse, and she'd taken it. That was worse. I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. I set it on the side table next to Richard's chair. Then I straightened and addressed the room. Not just my parents. Everyone. "I'm not going to let you lose your home and sleep on the street. That would make me like you. And I'm not like you." Gerald's head snapped up. Something flickered across his face. Relief, maybe, or the beginning of it. I didn't let it settle. "As trustee, Helen has prepared a 6-month lease for the cottage on Maple Street. I've approved the terms, one of Uncle Richard's properties. It's small but clean, market rate rent. If you can't pay immediately, the first 2 months are deferred." Helen opened her portfolio and produced a short stack of papers. She set them on the coffee table between us. Gerald looked at the documents, then at me. "A lease? You're going to charge your own parents' rent?" "You charged me for being alive, Dad. You counted every dollar you spent on my heart, 140,000. You told me that at the dinner table when I was 16. So, yes, market rate." He flinched. The number hadn't changed. He just hadn't expected to hear it from my mouth in front of people. "There's one more condition," I said. "Meredith takes down the Facebook post, the one where she told 300 people I abandoned the family. She posts a correction, a real one, or the lease is off the table." Meredith stared at me. "You can't be serious." "I'm extremely serious." I looked at each of them, Gerald, Patricia, Meredith, one at a time. "You have a week to decide. Helen has the paperwork." Then I walked out to the porch. The October air hit my face. Cool, clean. The sugar maples along the drive were blazing red and gold. I breathed in, deep, full. For the first time in 5 years, my chest didn't ache. The week after the gathering, my phone buzzed more than it had in 5 years combined. Aunt Carol called first. She talked for 40 minutes. Not about the trust or the money, but about me. About how Meredith had told the extended family I'd moved out west and wanted space. About how no one questioned it because Meredith told it so convincingly, with just the right amount of sadness in her voice. "I had no idea, Dulcie. None of us did. She made it sound like you wanted to disappear." Carol had already told the rest of the family, cousins, an uncle in Vermont, my mother's sister in New Hampshire. The truth spread the way truths do when they've been held underwater too long. Fast, messy, impossible to contain. I started receiving messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. "I'm so sorry. I should have asked. I can't believe Gerald let this happen." Each one was a small stitch in something that had been torn for a long time. Meredith's Facebook post was deleted within 3 days of the gathering, but she didn't post a correction. The comments section had already turned. Someone had asked pointed questions, then more. She locked her profile, then deactivated it entirely. Gerald and Patricia signed the lease on day 6. Helen handled the paperwork. Gerald signed without looking at me. Patricia signed with shaking hands. As they were leaving, Gerald paused at the door. He didn't turn around. He just stood there for a few seconds, one hand on the frame, like he was deciding whether to say something. Then he walked out. It was the first time I'd ever seen my father hesitate. They moved into the Maple Street cottage the following weekend. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a small yard, modest, clean, enough. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I sat on my own porch that evening with a mug of tea and stared at the darkening sky and felt something Dr. Klein had warned me about. "Closure doesn't always feel like victory," she'd said. "Sometimes it just feels like quiet." She was right. But then Nora called, and she told me something that cracked the quiet wide open. Dulcie, I need to tell you something. About your mother. She called the hospital. 1 week after your surgery. 2 in the morning. She asked if you were alive. Then she hung up. Didn't leave her name. But I took that call. I remember. Because she was crying. I didn't say anything for a long time. Nora waited. She was good at that. Good at sitting in silence with someone whose world had just tilted sideways. She knew, I finally said. She knew, Nora confirmed. I set down my tea. My hands were steady. But something inside my chest, something deeper than the scar, ached in a way I hadn't felt in years. Patricia had called. At 2 in the morning, 1 week after her daughter's heart was cut open and sewn shut, she'd picked up the phone, dialed the hospital, and asked a stranger if I was still breathing. Then she hung up, went back to bed, and didn't call again for 5 years. I sat with that for a long time. I didn't know what to do with a love that only shows up at 2 a.m., with the lights off, where no one can see it. Dr. Klein said it was the most common form of complicity, not hatred, not indifference, cowardice dressed up as loyalty. A month after the gathering, Meredith called me. I almost didn't pick up, but something in the timing felt different. It was late, past 10. Meredith never called late. Her voice was flat, no sweetness, no performance, just fatigue. I took the post down. I know, you didn't post a correction. I can't. If I do that, everyone will know that you lied? They already know, Meredith. A long silence. I could hear her breathing, ragged, unsteady. I don't know when I became this person, she said. I waited. She didn't say anything else. I can't answer that for you, I said. But you might want to talk to someone who can. She hung up without saying goodbye. In the weeks that followed, I heard the rest through Carol. Meredith had lost most of her friends after the divorce. Now, with the family knowing the truth, she'd lost her last audience. She was living in the Maple Street cottage with our parents, the 3 of them sharing 2 bedrooms in a house that belonged to the sister they'd discarded. I wrote 1 line in my journal that night, not for anyone else, for me. I didn't enjoy her pain, but I won't pretend it wasn't fair. 3 months after the gathering, my father came to my door. It was a Wednesday afternoon. No call beforehand, no text. I saw him through the window before I heard the knock. Standing on my porch in a wool coat that was too thin for November, his hands in his pockets. I opened the door. He looked different, not just older, smaller. The suit was gone. He wore a flannel shirt and khakis. His shoes were scuffed. His eyes were red but dry. He didn't ask to come inside. He stood on the porch and spoke. "The surgery," he said. "Your heart surgery." I knew. Meredith told me the hospital called. I told her to handle it. I didn't ask what she said. Why? He looked past me at the sugar maple in the yard. Its branches were bare. "Because I was ashamed," he said, "of how much your medical bills cost, of what it said about me as a provider. Every time you got sick, it felt like a reminder that I couldn't fix everything, and He stopped, swallowed, "and I punished you for it." I stood in the doorway. The wind moved through the yard. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked. I didn't hug him. I didn't slam the door. I just listened. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he said. "I know I don't deserve it." "You're right," I said. "You don't." He nodded, slowly. The way a man nods when he's heard the truth, and it's exactly the weight he expected. He turned to go, got 2 steps down the porch stairs. "Dad?" He stopped, turned. "Pay your rent on time." Something passed across his face. Not quite a smile, not quite relief. Something closer to recognition. That this was more than he'd earned, and he knew it. He nodded once. Then he walked to his car and drove away. A year passed, then another. The world didn't change overnight, but it shifted. Slowly, the way soil settles after a storm. I'm 33 now. I live in the Litchfield house. I repainted the porch this past spring, a pale gray that catches the morning light. There's a garden bed along the south fence, mostly herbs and tomatoes. And a cat named Buckley who showed up one February and never left. I work as a senior accountant at a firm in town. The partners know my name. My desk has a window that faces a row of birch trees. I'm not rich. I drive a 10-year-old Subaru. I pack my lunch most days. But every bill is paid, every payment is mine, and nobody counts what I cost. My health is steady. I see my cardiologist twice a year. I take my medication every morning with a glass of water on the porch. The scar on my chest has faded to a pale silver line. I used to cover it. I don't anymore. Nora is my closest friend. She drives up from Hartford every other weekend. We cook together, badly, and laugh about it. Aunt Carol calls on Sundays. Real calls, not the 4-minute kind. And Uncle Richard comes for dinner every Sunday evening. He brings the food because, in his words, my cooking is a safety hazard. We eat at the kitchen table. He tells stories. I listen. Sometimes we don't talk at all, and that's fine too. My parents are still in the cottage. The rent comes in on the first of every month. Gerald nods when he sees me at the grocery store. Patricia sent a Christmas card last year. Handwritten, no emoji. A real card with a real sentence. Thinking of you. Meredith started therapy. I know because Carol told me. She hasn't called. I haven't reached out. We're not a Hallmark family. I don't think we ever will be. But we're honest now. And honestly, that's more than I ever had. If you're listening to this, and some part of it sounds familiar, someone in your family who made you feel like a line item, someone who rewrote the story to make you the villain, I want you to know something. You don't have to wait for them to apologize. You don't have to wait for them to change. You just have to decide that the story they told about you isn't the one you live by. I didn't get revenge. I know that word gets thrown around in stories like this, but that's not what happened. What I got was clarity. And clarity is better than revenge, because revenge fades. Clarity stays. It becomes the ground you stand on. The hardest part wasn't the surgery, it wasn't the bills, it wasn't even the silence. The hardest part was the morning I finally stopped calling. I sat on my bed, phone in my hand, my mother's number on the screen, and I just set it down. That was the moment. Not the gathering, not the trust. That quiet, ordinary morning when I chose to stop reaching for people who had already let go. That was when I started living. Uncle Richard told me something once that I think about every single day. We were sitting on his porch, watching the light fade, and he said, "You don't owe anyone your suffering." I used to believe that love meant enduring pain from the people who caused it. That if I was just patient enough, kind enough, quiet enough, they'd eventually see me. They didn't. And the waiting almost killed me. Literally. So I stopped waiting. I left the door open. I didn't lock it. But I stopped standing by it. And the people who were supposed to walk through, some of them did. Just not the ones I expected. It's a Sunday night in October. I'm sitting on the porch of the Litchfield house. The sugar maple has turned, a deep, impossible gold against a gray sky. Buckley is curled at my feet, one paw twitching in some dream he'll never tell me about. There's a mug of chamomile going cold on the railing. My phone buzzes. I pick it up. A text from a number I haven't seen in months. "Hey, Dulcie, it's Meredith. I posted the correction today. I'm sorry it took this long." I read it twice. I feel it settle somewhere between my ribs. Not anger, not relief. Something quieter. Something like a door being set back on its hinges after years of hanging crooked. I set the phone face down on the armrest. Not because I'm ignoring it, but because I'll answer on my own time. Not hers. I'll respond. Eventually. Not today. Today is mine. 5 years ago, I woke up alone in a hospital room with 18 staples in my chest and no one to call. I thought that was the worst moment of my life. It wasn't. It was the beginning. Because that was the day I stopped being someone else's afterthought and started being my own first priority. And that's the story of how an envelope on a hospital bed gave me back my life. Not because of what was inside it, not because of the key or the documents or the money, but because someone looked at me and thought, she's worth choosing. If this story made you feel something, I'd love to know. Would you have let them stay? Or would you have let them figure it out alone? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit that bell. There are more stories waiting for you in the description below. Thank you for being here.